My sister threw a bowl of hot soup straight into my face because I refused to fix the presentation she was about to take credit for. For 1 second, all I heard was ceramic hitting hardwood. Then the heat registered. Soup ran down my cheek, under my jaw, and into the collar of my blouse. I stumbled back from the table, pressing a napkin against my burning skin. Brooke stared at me. Then she laughed. "Relax, Nora. It was just a little joke." My mother barely looked up. "Stop being so dramatic." I was 37 years old, a licensed architect, and I had spent 15 years learning that when something fails, you don't stare at the crack. You find out what was carrying the load. So I looked past Brooke, past my mother, straight at my father. Gary had one hand resting on the proposal binder beside his plate. The same proposal he had asked me to take a quick look at 10 minutes earlier. I opened it again. Page 3 contained the courtyard concept I had designed. Page 6 had my circulation plan. Even the entrance sequence came from sketches I had made on a Sunday afternoon after Dad told me he only needed a few ideas. But the cover said, "Brooke Whitman Creative Lead." My name wasn't anywhere. Dad said, "Nora, don't start. Everybody contributes where they're strongest." I closed the binder. "Then Brooke can present it." That was when she threw the soup. I left, had the burn treated, photographed everything, and ignored every call asking me to finish her slides. 48 hours later, someone started pounding on my condo door. Brooke stood outside with swollen eyes and that same proposal clutched against her chest. "The client wants a technical meeting tomorrow," she whispered. I said nothing. Her voice cracked. "They're asking questions I can't answer." I looked at the binder, then at the name printed across the front. "Do they know who actually designed it?" Brooke went silent. And that silence told me more than any apology could have. Because what I discovered after I finally opened my old project archives was that Brooke hadn't taken credit for my work once. My family had been erasing my name for 6 years. And the person who planned it wasn't my sister. It was my father. Sunday lunch at my parents' house had been a ritual for so long that I could have walked through it blindfolded. Dad carved whatever protein he had decided counted as lunch. Mom complained that I worked too much. Brooke showed up 10 to 15 minutes late and somehow still got asked whether she needed anything. I was the eldest daughter, which, in our family, meant I was the person people called when they had a question they didn't want to pay a professional to answer. "Electrical issue? Ask Nora. She works with contractors." "Doorway too narrow? Nora will know." "Could this wall come down?" "Send Nora a picture." "Did the floor plan make sense?" "Nora can look at it." I had been licensed for years. I ran my own 6-person architecture studio. I had actual clients, actual contracts, actual professional liability insurance. But to my family, I was still the daughter who could take a quick look. That Sunday, Dad slid the proposal binder toward me before I had finished half my soup. 10 minutes, he said. I looked at the cover. Whitman Renovation and Design. Civic Arts Building Redevelopment Proposal. Underneath that, Creative Lead. Brooke Whitman. I glanced at my sister. Brooke was 31 and good at things I wasn't. She could walk into a room full of strangers and remember every name 10 minutes later. She could make a dull materials board look expensive. She had a strong sense of color, knew how to talk to nervous clients, and understood social media better than anyone else in the family. Those were real skills. They just weren't the skills that had produced the drawings sitting in front of me. I turned to page 3. The first sketch showed an old municipal building wrapped around a narrow interior courtyard. 6 months earlier, Dad had emailed me photos of that exact building. "Could you just play with this?" Nothing formal. I had spent a Sunday afternoon drawing 3 different ways to reopen the courtyard and improve the main circulation path. One of them was right there. Same cut-through. Same relocated entrance. Same relationship between the stair and the public lobby. I flipped to page 6. There was my circulation diagram. Not similar. Mine. Even the slightly awkward little angle I had used to show the connection between the rear community room and the courtyard was still there. I looked at Dad. Where did this come from? He gave me the expression he used when he thought I was about to make a simple thing complicated. "You looked at the building for us." I developed the initial concept. Brooke set down her spoon. "We all worked on it. What part did you develop? Her eyes narrowed. What is this? A deposition? No. I'm asking what part you developed. Mom Sahil. Nora. That one word carried years of meaning. Don't embarrass your sister. Don't make Dad defensive. Don't turn lunch into a problem. Dad tapped the binder. Brooke took it from concept through the presentation package. That's not what I asked. He leaned back. Everybody contributes where they're strongest. There it was. My father's favorite sentence. He used it whenever the division of labor became inconvenient to examine. Brooke was strong at presenting. I was strong at the difficult technical thinking. Dad was strong at deciding which one of those counted as visible work. I looked back at the cover. Why isn't Northline listed? Dad rubbed his forehead. Because this is a Whitman proposal. The concept wasn't developed by Whitman. Brooke gave a short laugh. Oh my God. What? You have your own company, your own clients, your own little design team. And now you're counting sketches you did for Dad? My own little design team. I'd heard Dad use that phrase before too. Northline was 6 people, not 60, but 6 people still had salaries, deadlines, health insurance, project meetings, and clients who expected us to deliver what we promised. I closed the binder. If you want Northline to review the package, send me a scope tomorrow. Dad stared at me. A scope. Yes, for your father. For professional work. Mom said. Nora, this is family. I know. Brooke pushed her chair back slightly. You know what this is? I looked at her. You're jealous. I almost laughed. Of what? That Dad trusts me with the company. There was enough force in the sentence that I noticed it. Not a project. The company. I looked at Dad. He reached for his water. Brooke kept going. You always have to prove you're the smartest person in the room. I asked who designed the concept. Same thing. I stood. Then you don't need me. Brooke's face changed. It was fast. The kind of change you see in a client meeting when somebody realizes the thing they assumed was guaranteed might not be. You're not reviewing it? No. We have a meeting tomorrow. Then you should prepare for it. You know this building better than I do. That admission lasted less than 2 seconds. Then her mouth tightened. You're really going to screw Dad over because your name isn't printed big enough? Dad said, Brooke. But it wasn't a warning. It was the tone he used when he wanted her to lower the volume, not change direction. I picked up my purse. You'll figure it out. That was when Brooke reached for the serving bowl. I saw the movement but didn't understand it until it was already coming toward me. The soup hit the left side of my face. Hot broth. Vegetables. Something oily. I jerked sideways. The bowl slipped from her hands, struck the edge of the table, and shattered on the floor. My chair scraped backward. The room went silent. Heat spread down my cheek and under my blouse collar. I grabbed the cloth napkin from the table and pressed it against my neck. Brooke stared. Then she laughed. Not because anything was funny. It was the laugh people make when they've done something awful and desperately need everyone else to agree it wasn't awful. Relax, she said. It was just a little joke. Mom rolled her eyes. Brooke, honestly. Then she looked at me. Nora, stop being so dramatic. Go run some cool water on it. For a second, I couldn't speak. Not because of the pain. Because I was trying to understand how we had reached a point where my sister had thrown hot soup in my face and my mother's first instinct was to manage my reaction. Dad stood. Are you burned? I looked at him. Then at his hand. It was resting on the proposal binder. That detail lodged somewhere in me. He had secured the presentation before he had checked my face. I went upstairs to the bathroom I had used as a teenager. The wallpaper was different. The medicine cabinet was new. But the light switch was still slightly loose in the plate because Dad had never replaced the screw. I turned on the faucet and let cool water run over a clean washcloth. My skin was bright red across one cheek and along my jaw. Mom came to the door. You okay? I don't know yet. She shouldn't have done that. No. But you know Brooke. She gets emotional. I looked at my reflection. There was broth on my blouse. A piece of carrot had somehow ended up near my shoulder. Mom. What? Don't. She folded her arms. I'm not excusing her. You're explaining her before I've even said anything. I'm trying to keep this from becoming some huge thing. There it was. Not, is your face okay? Not, I'll deal with Brooke. Don't make this bigger. I pulled out my phone and took 3 photographs. Mom's expression shifted. What are you doing? Documenting it. Nora. What? Come on. I took another photo in better light. In architecture, existing conditions matter. You don't walk into a damaged building and start explaining what probably happened. You photograph. You measure. You record. Interpretation comes after. Apparently, I had spent 15 years applying that principle everywhere except my own family. I left through the side door. Dad followed me to the driveway. Nora. I unlocked my car. You're leaving? Yes. Over this? I turned. No. I'm leaving because the 3 of you are standing here acting like that question makes sense. His jaw tightened. Brooke apologized. She laughed. She was embarrassed. So was I. I didn't throw boiling liquid at anyone. It wasn't boiling. I stared at him. He seemed to hear himself only after the sentence had already left his mouth. I opened the car door. He said, "At least look at the proposal tonight. We have a deadline." That was the moment. Something small inside me stopped bending. Not breaking. Breaking is dramatic. This felt more like a bolt finally refusing another quarter turn. No. Nora. No. I got in my car and left. Urgent care confirmed what I had suspected. A superficial burn, painful, angry-looking, but no eye involvement and no deeper tissue damage. The nurse gave me basic care instructions and told me what changes would mean I needed to come back. I drove home with a packet of paperwork on the passenger seat and my phone buzzing every few minutes. Mom first. Your father has a very important meeting tomorrow. Dad. Call me when you've calmed down. Then Brooke. I didn't mean to actually hurt you. I stared at that one. 3 minutes later, another message appeared. Can you at least check pages 17-24? I actually laughed. Once. Quietly. Then I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter. An apology with an assignment attached. It was so perfectly my family that I almost admired the efficiency. The asking had changed over the years. The structure hadn't. They hurt me. I reacted. They explained why my reaction was inconvenient. Then they gave me something to fix. I didn't open the proposal. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into Northline's archive. I told myself I was looking for one thing, the original civic building concept. That was all. Find the file, confirm the date, then decide whether I was making this bigger than it was. The project folder was easy to find. I opened the first study, created 6 months earlier. My account, my file, my markup notes. The exported PDF had Northline's footer across the bottom. I opened my email search and found the message I had sent, Dad. Attached are 3 quick concept directions. These are preliminary only. If you move ahead, your architect of record will need to verify code, existing conditions, and develop the permit set. Clear. Normal. Professional. Dad had replied. Perfect. Exactly what I needed. That should have ended my search. Instead, another phrase caught my eye in an older email result. Can you send me a clean PDF without your footer? The message was 6 years old. Restaurant conversion. I clicked it, and just like that, I was 31 again. Northline had been barely 6 months old. I had 2 employees then, both part-time. My office was a narrow second-floor space above a print shop where the HVAC made a clicking noise every 40 seconds. I loved it. I was terrified of it. Every invoice mattered. Every client mattered. Every week, I woke up convinced I had made the most reckless decision of my life. Dad called one Friday afternoon. He had a restaurant client looking at an old corner retail space. The kitchen flow was bad. The entrance pinched the dining room. There were accessibility questions. I just need your eye, he said. That phrase. My eye. Never my contract. Never my fee. Never my studio. My eye. I said I could give him an hour. I worked most of Saturday. Then half of Sunday. By Sunday evening, I had a test fit, a cleaner entrance sequence, and a basic circulation concept that solved the worst of the conflicts. Dad called me. You're saving me. I remembered exactly how warm that sentence had felt. Back then, being useful to my father still sounded a lot like being respected. I sent him the PDF. 5 minutes later, he emailed back. Can you send me a clean copy without the Northline footer? Our presentation template won't match. I hesitated, then removed it. Family. One file. One weekend. No big deal. Whitman Renovation got the job. A few months later, Dad posted photographs from the opening. Brooke was standing beside him under the restaurant's new sign. She had selected finishes and helped style the dining room. That part was hers, but the caption said, "Proud of Brooke." Her fresh eye helped bring this place back to life. I had clicked, I sat at my kitchen counter 6 years later, staring at that little blue thumbs up as if someone else had pressed it. The next project came up in my search. A boutique hotel renovation. I remembered that one because I had canceled dinner with Rachel to help Dad solve the lobby plan. Rachel had texted me that night. "Family emergency again?" I had written, "Dad's client is in trouble. I'll make it up to you." I worked until almost midnight. At 11:42, Dad called. "You're the only person I trust with the hard stuff." Another sentence I had stored as love. 2 weeks later, I went to a client dinner because Dad insisted. He introduced Brooke to the owners as our creative brain. Then he gestured toward me. "My oldest. She has her own little firm." Little. I had smiled. I had even corrected no one when the hotel owner complimented Brooke on the clever lobby move. I told myself I didn't need the recognition. I had a license. My own firm. My own work. Maybe Brooke needed it more. That thought bothered me now. Not because it had been false. Because I couldn't remember whether it had originally been mine. The third project was a medical office conversion. That one answered a different question. Years ago, I had actually asked Dad whether Northline could be listed as concept consultant. Nothing dramatic. No demand for money. Just attribution. He had frowned and said, "Why make family work transactional?" I remembered the embarrassment that flooded me. As if I had asked my own father to pay admission to Thanksgiving. I apologized. That project later moved forward with Mercer Hall Architects as the architect of record. They developed the permit drawings, coordinated engineering, checked code, and sealed their own work. That was normal. I had never signed permit sets for Dad's company. Never stamped construction documents I hadn't controlled. My involvement was early-stage concept work. The part everyone liked to call just ideas, until those ideas won the room. I sat back. My cheek pulsed. The house was quiet. My phone lit up again. "Brooke, please don't do this to Dad." I didn't answer. For the first time, I wondered how many years my family had been depending on my guilt being faster than my questions. 48 hours after Sunday lunch, Brooke knocked on my condo door. Not rang. Knocked. Hard. I checked the camera in the hallway feed before opening. She stood there, holding the civic proposal against her chest. Her eyes were swollen. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "What?" The client moved the workshop up. I waited. "Tomorrow morning." "Okay." She stared at me. "Nora." "What?" "I need help. There are words you hear your whole life from one person and never really notice until the day you stop obeying them. Need. Family. Just. Quick. Help." I leaned against the doorframe. "What do you need?" She looked relieved too quickly. "They're asking for a technical workshop, not full technical, just, design rationale." "Then explain the design." She looked away. "They're asking why the entrance moved." "You're creative lead. Can you not do that right now?" "Do what?" "Talk to me like I'm stupid." "I'm asking you to explain your own proposal." Her face flushed. "It's not that simple." "It was simple when you put your name on the cover." "Nora, what did you tell them about the concept?" She didn't answer. I looked at the binder. "Do they know Northline developed the initial studies?" Silence. That was the answer. Brooke shifted her weight. "I just need you on the call." "As Northline?" "No." I actually smiled. "No? You can just listen. Mute yourself. If they ask something technical, text me." I stared at her. She must have heard how bad it sounded because she rushed on. "You don't even have to talk." "That's generous." "Oh my God, stop. You want me to sit off camera and feed you answers to questions about work with your name on it. It's Dad's proposal." "That isn't what I asked." She tightened her grip on the binder. "You know this building better than I do." There it was again. A truth, escaping under pressure. "Then why does the cover say your name?" You have your own company. That's not an answer. You have everything already. The sentence landed harder than the soup had. Not because it was cruel. Because it sounded old. Practiced. Almost inherited. I said. And that means what? It means you don't need every little thing. My name on my work is not a little thing. Dad is counting on me. For what? Brooke's mouth opened. Then she said, for the future. I waited. She looked down. Something in her expression closed. I didn't know what she meant yet. And I wasn't going to invent an answer for her. What future? Forget it. Brooke. She looked back at me. You're really going to let Dad lose this over soup? I felt something in me settle. This isn't about soup anymore. Her face hardened. Fine. She stepped backward. You always do this. Do what? Make everyone feel stupid because you know more. I didn't put your name on that proposal. She turned and walked toward the elevator. I closed the door. Then I stood there listening to the elevator cables move behind the wall. Old Nora would have opened the door again, called her name, offered 20 minutes, maybe 30. Enough to help without taking over. Enough to make the meeting work. Enough to preserve peace. Instead, I locked the door. The next morning at Northline, Maya Chen came into my office carrying a printed concept page. Maya was 27, fast, observant, and better at asking questions than pretending she knew answers. I adjusted the south wall study, she said. But you changed most of the final concept yesterday. Do you want me to take my initials off? I looked down. Her initials were in the lower right corner beside the study number. No. She paused. Even though you revised it? You did the first pass. Okay. She turned to leave. Maya. She looked back. Keep your name on work you actually did. She gave me a slightly confused smile. Sure. After she left, I stared at the empty doorway. I had set it like a studio policy. Maybe it should have been one. I opened my email, typed, without your footer, then hit search. The result count appeared. 11. I sat very still. 11 messages didn't necessarily mean 11 stolen designs. I knew that. A phrase could repeat for harmless reasons. A footer might need removing because of template conflicts. A study might have been minor. A project might have changed completely. So I did what I did when a building history was messy. I stopped telling myself a story and built a record. Project. Date. Initial request. Native source file. What I actually produced. Who received it. What Whitman renovation eventually presented. What credit appeared publicly. By lunch, I had 4 projects. By 3, 7. By the end of the day, 11. And the truth was more complicated than the angry version I wanted. That mattered. In 4 of them, my involvement had been light. A review, some red lines, a couple of suggestions. Brooke had done legitimate work. In 3, I had produced substantial concept studies, and the Whitman team had developed them further before an outside architect of record took over. In 4, the initial design direction was overwhelmingly mine. Those were the ones that made my stomach tighten. Because in those 4, Brooke appeared in the marketing history as some version of creative lead, design lead, next generation vision. I added another column. Actual Brooke contribution. Where she had done something real, I wrote it down. Finish palette, client workshop, presentation sequencing, interior styling. I wasn't trying to make her disappear. That would have made me exactly as careless with truth as Dad had been. What I wanted was narrower, harder, accuracy. Around 5, I called Mom. She answered on the second ring. How's your face? Better. I told Brooke she owes you an apology. Did Whitaker Renovation ever pay Northline for any of these concept packages? Silence. Nora. It's a yes or no question. I don't handle your company. You handled Dad's books for years. What exactly are you doing? Checking records. You're still on this? My hand tightened around the phone. Mom, did Whitman ever pay Northline? I don't remember. Okay. Nora. What? Your father is very upset. I'm aware. You know how much this company means to him. I do. And Brooke is under tremendous pressure. I'm aware of that too. Then what are you trying to accomplish? I looked at the spreadsheet on my screen. I'm trying to find out what happened. Mom sighed. Sometimes things aren't as clean as your little spreadsheets. No, but dates usually are. She went quiet. 2 days later, she showed up at Northline carrying a gray archive box. I saw her through the glass wall of the conference room. She looked smaller inside my office than she ever did at home. Maybe because my mother's authority had always been strongest in rooms she controlled. She set the box on my desk. I kept things because that was my job. I opened the lid. Printed emails, old calendars, meeting notes, vendor correspondence, bookkeeping printouts, nothing dramatic, which made it more useful. Real systems rarely leave one perfect smoking gun. They leave ordinary paperwork. I picked up an old email chain. Why did you bring this? Mom sat down. Because you're going to keep looking anyway. That wasn't an answer. But it was true. I found the first invoice record. No payment to Northline. Then another. Nothing. A third. Nothing. Mom said. Your father thought you were helping. I was helping. You make it sound sinister. I haven't called it anything. You're making a file. I make files for a living. You're an architect. Exactly. She rubbed her hands together. I found an email from 4 years earlier. From Mom to Dad. Should Nora's studio be listed on this one? Dad's reply. Brooke needs the exposure. Nora already has her own career. That was all. No follow-up. I read it again. Then looked at Mom. You asked. She stared at the box. Yes. So, you noticed. I noticed you were doing a lot. And? And your father had his reasons. What reasons? He wanted Brooke to build confidence. I kept looking at her. Mom shifted. She was having a hard time then. Brooke is always having a hard time when something belongs to me. Nora. I pulled the email closer. You asked whether my studio should be listed. Dad told you no because Brooke needed exposure. Then what? Nothing. That's what I thought. Her eyes sharpened. Don't do that. Do what? Turn my silence into some kind of conspiracy. I didn't call it a conspiracy. You're implying I participated. I looked at the email. You knew enough to ask the question. She stood. I'm not sitting here while you interrogate me. Then don't. Mom looked hurt. And for years, that expression would have ended the conversation. I would have followed, explained, softened, maybe apologized for my tone. Instead, I let her walk to the door. She stopped with her hand on the handle. Your father loves you. I looked at the archive box. I know. She turned. Then act like it. The door closed. I sat there for a long time. Then I kept reading. The email that changed the shape of the whole story was 3 years old. Dad to Mom. The subject line was boring. Riverside presentation. Most of the thread was logistics. Meeting time. Print boards. Client lunch. Then one paragraph. Brooke needs more projects with her name on them if she's ever going to take over. Nora already has Northline. This needs to be Brooke's lane. I stopped breathing for a second. Not because the sentence was dramatic. Because it wasn't. Dad had written it like a scheduling note. Like the problem had already been solved. Brooke needs projects with her name. If she's ever going to take over. I read it twice. Then 3 times. My eyes moved to the invitation Mom had left partly sticking out of the archive box. Heavy cream cardstock, embossed lettering. Whitman renovation, 30 years. Underneath, celebrating the past. Introducing the future. I remembered Brooke standing outside my condo. Dad is counting on me. For what? For the future. I had thought I was auditing stolen credit. I wasn't. I was looking at a succession plan. And suddenly, 6 years of small choices lined up. The weekend favors. The missing footers. The client dinners. Dad calling me the one I trust with the hard stuff. Brooke being introduced as the creative brain. Mom telling me not to make family work transactional. I had spent years solving difficult pieces quietly because I believed I was helping my father. He had been using those same pieces to make someone else look ready to inherit the company. My phone rang. Dad. I let it ring twice before answering. What? Your mother told me what you're doing. What am I doing? Turning a family misunderstanding into some kind of audit. I looked at the 11 project spreadsheet. It became an audit when the date stopped matching the story. You hear yourself? Very clearly. Nora, you helped. Brooke presented. Everybody contributed where they were strongest. Then why does only one contribution disappear? He exhaled through his nose. You already had a career. There it was. Same sentence as the email. I didn't say anything. He kept going. Brooke needed room to become something. And I was what? Spare material? That's ridiculous. Is it? You had Northline. She had Whitman. I didn't realize my company meant you could use its work without naming it. Family doesn't operate like some corporate billing department. You weren't treating it like family when you were building her portfolio. Silence. Then Dad said, "Call me when you calm down." The line went dead. I stared at my phone. 6 years earlier, that would have wrecked me. Dad withdrawing approval. Dad deciding I was being difficult. Dad waiting for me to come back reasonable. That day, it just clarified the load path. I opened a new email. To Gary Whitman. CC Brooke. Subject: Northline Studio Future Professional Services. I kept it short. Effective immediately, Northline would no longer perform unpaid architectural review or concept work for Whitman renovation. Any future work required a written scope. Northline material could not be used in new client-facing presentations without agreed attribution. I would not coach anyone in meetings where someone else was being represented as the sole author of work I had created. No accusations. No threats. No mention of soup. Just a boundary. I read it once, then sent it. Brooke replied in 9 minutes. You are unbelievable. Dad didn't reply at all. That Friday, I opened the RFP for the Neighborhood Arts Center. It had been sitting in a folder on my desktop for almost 2 months. A brick building from the 1920s. Old auditorium. Bad accessibility. A complicated community use program. Exactly the kind of project I loved. I had almost passed on it because the deadline overlapped with Dad's anniversary event and because Whitman had been crazy busy. I called Maya into my office. You still interested in the arts center? Her face lit up. I thought we weren't going after it. We are now. She smiled. Seriously? Seriously. We spent an hour dividing tasks. Maya would lead community use research. Luis would help with existing condition documentation. I'd handle design direction. We'd bring in a cost consultant early. Names where the work was. For the first time in days, I felt something other than anger. Space. Not much, but enough. Sunday evening, Dad called 3 times. Then Brooke. Then Mom. The civic client meeting was Monday morning. I knew exactly what they needed. I knew the questions the client would probably ask. I knew the weak spots in the presentation. I could have fixed them in 2 hours. Maybe less. That was what made it difficult. Saying no when you can't help is easy. Saying no when you are the person most capable of saving the situation is different. At 9:15, Brooke texted, "Please, just tell me why you moved the main entrance." I stared at the message. My cheek had mostly healed, but hot water still made the skin sting. For 1 second I was back at my parents' table. The bowl. The heat. My mother telling me not to be dramatic. Then Brooke asking about pages 17-24. I put my phone face down, opened the Arts Center files, and kept working. The next morning, I came into Northline early. The office was quiet. Sunlight hit the conference room glass. The archive box was still beside my desk. I decided I was done with it for the day. As I lifted it to move it into storage, a folded program slipped out from underneath the papers. I picked it up. Whitman Renovation's 30th Anniversary Program. Draft copy. I turned to the last page. At the top, in large serif lettering, "The Next Generation." Underneath was a photograph of Brooke. And only Brooke. I looked from that page to the folder containing 11 projects. For years, I had thought I was helping my father when he needed me. I had thought the missing credits were carelessness. Maybe favoritism. Maybe old-fashioned family entitlement. But now I understood what I had actually been doing. I hadn't just helped my younger sister succeed. I had spent 6 years helping my father build the person he planned to put in his chair. And he had done it with work he had quietly removed my name from. The worst part of seeing Brooke's photograph under the words, "The Next Generation," wasn't jealousy. It was recognition. Dad hadn't been improvising. He had been building toward that page. By Tuesday morning, the story had already started traveling ahead of me. Aunt Denise called to say, Dad claimed I was jealous of Brooke taking over. It's about accurate professional attribution, I told her. I'm handling it directly. When she asked whether that was worth blowing up the family, the old reflex told me to explain until she approved of me. I ended the call and muted the family thread. That afternoon, Dad walked into Northline without an appointment. He stopped beneath the glass lettering on the front wall. I gave you your start, he said when we were alone. You gave me experience. You learned on my job sites. I've never denied that. I'm separating gratitude from ownership. He laughed once. You don't invoice your father for being your father. I'm not invoicing you for parenting me. I'm talking about architecture. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he leaned toward the desk. Brooke stayed. You left and built this. The way he said it made Northline sound like a betrayal. I opened a studio. I didn't leave the family. You chose your lane. And that gave you the right to use my work to build hers? He straightened. Brooke needed a future. There it was again. Not a project. A future. Later, Mom reminded me that my grandfather's contracting business had closed when none of his children wanted it. Dad had repeated one sentence for years. If it dies when you leave, you didn't build anything permanent. Now the anniversary program made sense. Brooke was still inside Whitman renovation. I had built something with another name on the door. Understanding his fear didn't excuse what he had done. It only explained it. 2 days later, Brooke asked to meet at a coffee shop near Northline. I never told Dad to erase you, she said before I had taken off my coat. Did you know some of those concepts were mine? Her eyes moved toward the window. Some. Did you ever correct him? She picked at the paper sleeve around her cup. You had a license. Clients. Your own company. You didn't need those projects the way I did. I sat back. There was the whole system in one sentence. Because I had something, pieces of it could be taken. Because Brooke lacked something, whatever filled the gap became hers. Dad built the system, I said. You still accepted what it gave you. Her face hardened. You always make everything sound clinical. It helps when people keep changing the story. She left without finishing her coffee. The next morning, she forwarded an email from the outside architect working on the civic project. The questions were ordinary. Why had the public entrance shifted? What assumption supported the courtyard cut-through? Which circulation problem was the concept solving? Brooke added one line. Please just tell me what to say. I wrote back. Those questions should go to the team currently retained for the project. Her answer came almost immediately. You know why we made those choices? I typed, yes. Then came another message. And I don't. I stared at it. The problem had reached a place applause couldn't cover. I did not send the answers. That afternoon, Maya and I spread the Arts Center proposal across the conference table. She had finished the community use research. Luis had documented the existing building. Maya pointed to the presentation credits. Do you want the concept pages under your name since you're project lead? No, put names where the work is. It felt less like a policy than a decision about what kind of place I wanted Northline to be. That night, I completed the project provenance record. 11 projects, not 11 accusations, 11 histories. Where Brooke had done real work, I listed it. Where Whitman staff had developed something beyond my studies, I wrote that too. Then, I attached native file dates, version histories, exports, and email chains. One line from Dad still sat at the center of it. Brooke needs projects with her name on them if she's ever going to take over. A week before the anniversary, Dad asked me to come to his office. An organizational chart was waiting on the conference table. Nora Whitman, Principal Design Advisor. My name sat beside Brooke's. For several seconds, I simply looked at it. That title was embarrassingly close to something I had once wanted. Proof that Dad saw me as more than the person who fixed things after everyone else went home. We can stop this, he said. What does the role mean? You advise on design. Help Brooke through the transition. I introduce you properly at the anniversary. And, the old project credits? His expression shifted. Nora, will they be corrected? The past is the past. So no, I'm offering you a future. A coffee machine hissed outside the room. Warm air touched the side of my face. For 1 second, I felt the soup again. My collar, Mom telling me not to make it bigger, Brooke asking me to check pages 17 through 24. The pattern was obvious. Cause harm. Offer a task. Call compliance reconciliation. I took the chart home and sent Dad one written question. Will Whitman Renovation correct existing portfolio and client-facing records where Northline's work is attributed solely to Brooke? His answer arrived 6 hours later. The past is the past. I'm offering you a future. The next morning, I declined. I thanked him for the offer, confirmed that future Northline work required a written scope and accurate attribution, and ended with one sentence. I won't trade accurate credit for a place on an organizational chart. He called 3 times. I didn't answer. He had my answer in writing. Brooke came to Northline that afternoon because I asked her to. I put the provenance record on the table. I'm not asking you to take my side. You need to know what's actually inside the portfolio Dad is using to make you his successor. She opened it. On one project, she pointed to the contribution column. I did the finished strategy. Yes. And the client workshop. Yes. You left that in. It happened. Then came the native dates, exported files, clean copy requests, and finally the succession email. Brooke read it twice. Dad expects me to lead these meetings. I waited. What happens when they ask me why something was designed a certain way? You answer what you know. Her voice dropped. What if I don't know? Then, you stop pretending that you do. She pushed back from the table. I can't run what he thinks I can run. There it was. Not remorse yet. Fear. The title had always sounded like a reward. Now she could see the work hidden inside it. Tell me what I'm supposed to do, she said. For years, that sentence would have activated me like an alarm. Not this time. I can tell you which work was yours. What you do with that information is yours. You drop this on me and walk away? I'm giving you the truth. I'm not carrying the choice too. She left with a copy. The same week, the civic client contacted Northline after one consultant mentioned my involvement in the early studies. I answered 3 things and nothing more. Northline had created the initial concept studies. We were not currently retained. Future architectural services required direct engagement. The client thanked me and asked Whitman to clarify the project team. No dramatic cancellation followed. Dad simply had to pay qualified professionals for work he could no longer pull invisibly from me. On Friday, Northline submitted the Arts Center proposal. My cursor hovered over a blank email to Dad. Would love your thoughts. I deleted it and sent the proposal directly to the client. That evening, I kept dinner with Rachel. My phone stayed in my bag through dessert. The following afternoon, Dad sent 3 messages. Be there Saturday. Don't embarrass this family. Then, if you can't support your sister for one night, don't expect things to go back to normal. I read normal twice. For the first time, it didn't sound like something I might lose. It sounded like something I had escaped. I went to the anniversary, because if Dad used my presence to authenticate his version, I was done lending him my silence too. The walls were covered with decades of Whitman projects. I recognized several of mine beneath captions like Brooke-led design and next-generation vision. Dad took the microphone and talked about sacrifice, continuity, and family. Then came the sentence I had heard for years. Everybody contributes where they're strongest. He called Brooke forward and announced her as creative director and future successor. An office key and commemorative plaque went into her hands. People applauded. Brooke didn't smile. She was holding the provenance folder. Then Dad looked at me. Nora, come up here. You've helped Brooke so much over the years. This belongs to both of you. I walked forward. As I reached him, he leaned close. Just smile. Instead, I faced the room. Northline created the initial concept work for several projects displayed here tonight. In multiple client-facing versions, our attribution was removed. Northline will no longer provide unpaid or uncredited professional work to Whitman Renovation. Silence settled over the room. I'm not asking anyone to choose between my sister and me. I'm correcting the record about my own work. Dad took the microphone back. Nora already had her own firm. Brooke needed opportunities. You had everything. Your sister needed something that was hers. He had just explained the system better than I ever could. Then he held the office key toward me. Fine. If the title matters so much, you take it. For years, I had wanted him to choose me. Standing there, I realized how little I wanted the prize once I understood the price. I already have a company. This is your family's company. Then it shouldn't need one daughter to disappear so the other can inherit it. I left the key in his hand. Dad turned to Brooke. Take it. She looked at the plaque, then at the folder. I can't do this job. You've been doing it for years. No. Her voice shook. I've been presenting it for years. She placed the plaque on the table. I can't run a company on a portfolio I can't defend. Dad looked toward Mom. For years, she had been the person who softened every room he damaged. This time she said only, Gary, the records are accurate. 3 weeks later, Whitman Renovation was still open. That mattered. Justice did not require destruction. Dad now had to pay for architectural services he had once treated like a daughter's spare time. The succession announcement disappeared, and several project descriptions were corrected. Months later, Brooke stepped away from Whitman and took a project coordination job at another firm. Smaller title, real responsibilities, no invisible sister feeding her answers. Her apology came 4 months after the soup. I knew some of those projects weren't mine, and I let people think they were because I liked what it made me look like. Then, another message. And throwing the soup at you wasn't a joke. I waited 2 days. Thank you for saying it accurately. Mom came to Northline once and admitted she had known enough to ask questions, then stopped because keeping Dad calm had been easier than defending me. That's different from not knowing, I said. I know. Dad never apologized. On my birthday, he sent one line. I hope someday you understand what I was trying to preserve. I didn't answer. By then, Northline had won the Arts Center project. 6 months after that Sunday lunch, Maya brought the final concept presentation into my office. I wasn't sure if you wanted my name left on the early study, she said. You changed a lot afterward. I looked at the footer. Nora Whitman, Maya Chen. Then I noticed Luis was missing from the existing conditions credit. I added his name. Maya smiled. You want everybody on there? If they did the work, leave the name. I saved the file and closed the laptop. For years, I thought strength meant being the person who could carry more without complaining. I knew better now. Sometimes strength was refusing to carry what had never belonged to you. And sometimes it was as simple as leaving a name exactly where it had been earned. 6 months after I told Maya to leave every contributor's name on the Arts Center presentation, an email from Whitman Renovation appeared in my inbox at 7:12 on a Monday morning. The subject line was almost funny. Request for professional services. For a few seconds, I just stared at it. Dad had never used those words with me before. He had said quick look, small favor, your eye, family thing, nothing formal, never professional services. I opened the message. Whitman Renovation was pursuing the conversion of an old neighborhood grocery store into a childcare and community learning center. Dad wanted Northline to review the preliminary layout and develop 2 early concept options before his client meeting. Attached was a 1-page scope. That alone told me something had changed. Then, I reached the last paragraph. Given our family relationship and the opportunity for future collaboration, I assume you can keep the fee reasonable. There he was. Not gone. Not transformed. Just learning new vocabulary around the same expectation. I leaned back in my chair. Across the studio, Maya was pinning material samples to a board, while Luis compared field photographs from the Arts Center site. Nobody knew what had just landed in my inbox. Nobody needed to. I opened our standard proposal template. The old version of me would have started by reducing the fee. Then I would have taken out project administration. Then maybe cut concept hours. By the time I sent it, I would have found a way to call half the work a family favor and still told myself I had established a boundary. Instead, I priced it exactly the way I would for any other contractor. 2 concept options, 1 review meeting, 1 revision round, clear ownership and attribution language. Additional work billed separately. I read it once and sent it. Dad replied, 11 minutes later. This is your full commercial rate. I typed back. Yes. His next message arrived almost immediately. I thought we were trying to find a way forward. My fingers stopped over the keyboard. There had been a time when that sentence could have kept me awake all night. A way forward. Peace. Moving on. Starting fresh. Our family had always had beautiful names for returning me to the same position. I wrote, "A professional relationship is one possible way forward. This is how Northline handles professional work." Dad called. I let it ring. Then he called again. On the third attempt, I answered. "Nora, what are you doing?" "Working. You know what I mean. I sent you the proposal you requested. You're charging me what you'd charge a stranger." "I'm charging for the scope." He made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. "You really want to do this forever?" "Do what?" "Treat your own father like a client. You contacted my architecture firm for architecture services. I contacted my daughter. That's exactly the problem." Silence. Dad lowered his voice. "I'm trying here. So am I. I sent something in writing. I gave you a proper scope. Isn't that what you wanted?" "Yes, and I responded with a proper fee." Another silence. Then he said, "I thought there'd be some consideration." "There is." "What?" I considered the scope. He hung up. My hand stayed around the phone for a moment. Then I started laughing. Not because I had won. Because 6 months earlier, that call would have swallowed the entire morning. I would have replayed every sentence, wondering whether I had sounded cold. Now I looked at the clock and realized I had a client meeting in 12 minutes. So I went to it. That afternoon, Mom called. I nearly let it go to voicemail, then answered because our relationship had reached a strange, cautious place where answering no longer meant surrendering the next hour. "Hi, Mom. Your father's upset." I closed my eyes. There it was. The old delivery route. Gary felt something. Linda carried it. I received it. "Then he can call me." He did. And we spoke. "Well, he feels like you punished him with that proposal." I turned my chair toward the window. "Are you asking me something, or are you delivering Dad's feelings?" She went quiet. A year earlier, I would never have asked that so plainly. "I'm just telling you." "I know, that's what I'm asking you not to do anymore." "Nora." "Mom, if Dad has a business concern, he can send it to Northline. If he has something personal to say, he can say it himself. I'm not allowed to talk about your father now?" "That's not what I said." She exhaled. Then, to my surprise, she stopped. "All right, 2 words. No guilt. No accusation." She changed the subject and asked whether the art center demolition had started. "Selective demolition next week," I said. "Are you excited?" I looked through the conference room glass at Maya and Luis arguing cheerfully over whether one salvaged brick wall was beautiful or just expensive. "Actually, yes," Mom said. "Good." When we hung up, I sat still for a few seconds. Some changes arrived with speeches. Others sounded like a person deciding not to say the next thing. Dad did not accept Northline's proposal. 3 days later, he emailed, "We've decided to use another architect." I replied, "Understood. Best of luck with the project." That was it. Whitman renovation did not collapse. The community center did not fail. Nobody called me begging for rescue. Dad hired someone else and paid them. The world kept turning. That may have been the most important consequence of all. For years, he had made my free labor feel essential enough that refusing it seemed almost destructive. It turned out he had always had another option. He simply preferred the one that cost me more and him less. The next Sunday, I woke at 8:30 without an alarm. For most of my adult life, Sunday mornings had carried a low-grade sense of obligation. Who needed something? Was Dad going to send plans? Would Brooke have a presentation? Was Mom going to ask whether I could come early? That morning, nobody was waiting for me. I made coffee and walked to the farmer's market. I bought bread I didn't need, flowers for my kitchen, and a ceramic bowl from a local potter whose booth I had passed dozens of times without stopping. The bowl was deep blue, with an uneven white line around the rim. "Each one's a little different," the woman behind the table said. "That's why I like it." I carried it home in a paper bag. It wasn't until I put it in my kitchen cabinet that I noticed what I had bought. A soup bowl. For a second, the left side of my face tightened. Not pain. Memory. Brooke's hand moving. Heat down my jaw. Mom telling me I was dramatic. Dad protecting the proposal before checking me. I touched the edge of the new bowl. Then I put it on the shelf. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life letting one ugly moment claim ordinary objects. Brooke and I had coffee 2 weeks later. It was only our second time sitting together since her apology. She looked different without Whitman renovation branding wrapped around her. Not physically, just less rehearsed. Her new job was still project coordination and client design liaison. She had been there a few months. "How's it going?" I asked. She stirred her coffee. "Humbling." I waited. She gave me a small smile. "You'd enjoy that answer." "No, I'm asking." Her smile disappeared. "Last week, someone asked me whether we could move a rated wall." I started answering. I raised an eyebrow. Brooke nodded. "I know." Then I stopped and said I needed the architect to answer. And nothing." "What do you mean?" My boss said, "Okay." I almost smiled. Brooke looked down at her cup. "I spent years thinking not knowing something meant people would figure out I shouldn't be in the room. Sometimes not knowing means you ask the person whose job it is to know. Apparently," she hesitated, "Dad still thinks I'll come back." "What did you tell him?" "That I'm not ready." I didn't correct her. Didn't say she should tell him never. Didn't design the conversation she needed to have. That choice belonged to her. Brooke looked at me. "Do you think I should?" There it was again. "Tell me what to do." The sentence had lost some of its power over me. "What do you want?" She frowned. I asked what you think. "I know. That's annoying. I can live with that." For once, she laughed without somebody else paying for it. Then her expression became serious. "I don't know what I want yet." "That sounds more honest than pretending you do." She nodded. We talked about other things after that. Her commute. The art center. A restaurant she thought I'd like. We didn't leave as healed sisters. There was too much history for a cup of coffee to erase. But I left without carrying her decisions home with me. A month later, Northline held the first major community review for the Arts Center project. The room smelled like coffee, old brick, and the temporary carpet the city had installed 20 years earlier and apparently forgotten. Our boards stood along one wall. Residents moved between them, leaving notes about classroom access, evening events, storage, and the small performance space. A woman in her 70s pointed at the project credit panel. "You put everybody on here?" I followed her finger. "Northline Studio." My name. Maya's. Luis's. Our structural consultant. Mechanical consultant. Landscape designer. Community engagement lead. "Everybody who contributed to this stage," I said. She nodded, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. It should have been. That was the strange part. The thing I had spent years being told was petty, transactional, unnecessary, even selfish looked completely normal outside my parents' house. People worked. Their work was recorded. Nobody had to disappear for somebody else to shine. After the meeting, Maya handed me a stack of comment cards. "You heading home?" "In a minute." She pointed toward a few of us gathering our coats. "We're getting dinner." I almost said no. My old automatic answer. There were drawings to review. Emails waiting. A laundry load at home. Then I caught myself. "Where?" "Thai place around the corner." "I'm coming." We took a long table near the window. Someone ordered soup for the table. When the server placed the steaming bowl in front of me, the smell rose first. Ginger. Lemongrass. Heat against my face. My hand paused. Maya noticed. "You okay?" I looked at the bowl. Then at the people around me. Nobody was asking me to fix a deadline. Nobody was using my name as a bargaining chip. Nobody had placed a job beside an apology. "Yeah," I said. "I'm good." I served myself. Later that night, Dad emailed. Not about work. No attachment. No request. Just one sentence. "I saw the art center photos online. It looks good." I read it twice. Months earlier, that sentence might have been enough to pull me back toward him. The recognition I had wanted. A crumb with exactly the flavor I remembered. I didn't punish him for sending it. I also didn't turn it into more than it was. I replied, "Thank you. The team has done strong work." Then I closed the email. No invitation to review drawings. No question about whether he was proud. No opening through which the old arrangement could quietly walk back in. The blue soup bowl was sitting in the drying rack beside the sink when I got home. I picked it up and ran my thumb along the uneven white line. For years, I had believed being the strong daughter meant making myself useful enough that nobody would have a reason to leave me out. I had it backward. Strength was not unlimited access. It was not unpaid labor. It was not swallowing humiliation because somebody else needed confidence. It was being able to decide what I would give, what I would keep, and whose name belonged on the work. The next morning, I opened the Arts Center file. Maya had uploaded a revised concept page overnight. At the bottom were all the contributor names. None missing. I checked the drawing, made 2 notes, saved my comments, and left every name exactly where it belonged. Leaving every name where it belonged should have felt like the end of the argument. It wasn't. 3 weeks later, Mom called at 8 on a Thursday evening. "Your father wants both of you at the office Sunday." I was standing in my kitchen with wet clay under my fingernails. The pottery class I had talked about taking for almost 2 years had started that month. I was terrible at it. My first cup leaned left. My second looked like it had been sat on. I loved both of them. "Why?" I asked. "He wants to discuss the future of Whitman. That's a business meeting. It's also a family matter." The phrase landed differently now. "What does he want from me?" Mom hesitated. "He's changing the succession plan. That doesn't require me. He thinks you should hear it from him." I rinsed clay from my hands. "If he wants a meeting, he can email me the purpose." "Nora, can you please just come without turning everything into terms and conditions?" "I'm asking what the meeting is about." "You know what it's about." "No. I know what you think it's about." Silence. Then Mom said, more carefully, "He's considering putting someone outside the family into the leadership track." That made sense. Whitman Renovations still needed somebody to run operations when Dad stepped back. Brooke had left. I had refused the role. The business hadn't evaporated because his daughters stopped performing the parts he assigned us. Okay, you'll come? I'll come to the office, not the house." Mom went quiet again. I knew she understood why. The last time all 4 of us had sat around their dining table, I'd driven home with a burn across my face. "I'll tell him," she said. "No, have him email me." "Nora, I'm not using you as his messenger anymore." A breath moved through the phone. Then she said, "Fine." Dad's email arrived 12 minutes later. "Sunday, 10 a.m. Whitman Conference Room. I want to discuss leadership transition and resolve where this family stands." I read the last 6 words twice. Leadership transition was business. Where this family stands was pressure. I replied that I would attend for 1 hour. Sunday morning, I parked beside the Whitman office at 9:53. The building had been part of my childhood as much as my parents' house. I had done homework in the reception area. At 16, I had spent a summer labeling material samples and filing invoices. At 22, I had stood beside Dad on job sites in steel-toed boots 2 sizes too large because he insisted I needed to understand construction before I could design anything worth building. Some of what he gave me was real. That was what made separating from him difficult. People prefer clean villains because clean villains make clean exits. Dad had taught me useful things. He had also decided those lessons entitled him to my labor indefinitely. Both could be true. Brooke was already in the conference room when I arrived. Mom sat beside her. Dad stood at the end of the table with a folder in front of him. No coffee. No food. Nothing that could pretend this was Sunday lunch. Dad pointed to a chair. I sat. He remained standing. "I'm not going to drag this out." "That would be good." Mom gave me a look. I ignored it. Dad opened the folder. "I've asked Tom Reeves to begin taking on more executive responsibility." I knew Tom. He had run field operations for Whitman for years. Competent, steady, not family. Dad continued, "If things go well, he'll move into general management while I reduce my day-to-day role." Brooke's hands stayed folded in her lap. I said, "That sounds reasonable." Dad looked at me as if I had insulted him. "Reasonable. Yes. 30 years building a company so I could hand it to my children, and now handing it to an employee is reasonable." There it was. The meeting wasn't about informing us, it was about assigning the cost. "Tom isn't stealing the company from you," I said. "You're choosing a qualified person to manage it." "I shouldn't have to." Brooke spoke quietly. "Dad." He turned toward her. "You could still come back. She looked down. I told you I'm not ready. You've had months. That doesn't make me ready. Dad's jaw tightened. This whole idea that you're somehow unqualified appeared after Nora started digging through old files. Brooke looked at me. For years, that would have been enough. A crisis between Dad and Brooke would become mine to translate, soften, and repair. I stayed silent. Dad turned to me. Nothing to say? Brooke can answer for Brooke. He laughed without humor. Convenient. No, new. Brooke took a breath. She didn't tell me to leave. Dad looked back at her. She showed you that file. Yes. She made you think your whole career was fake. Brooke's voice sharpened. She showed me which parts weren't mine. And somehow that destroyed your confidence. No. Brooke rubbed her thumb against the edge of the table. It showed me where I was depending on work I couldn't explain. Dad leaned forward. That's what mentors are for. That's why Nora was supposed to help you. I felt the old pull then. Supposed to. A role turned into an obligation by repetition. You never asked me to mentor Brooke, I said. Dad looked at me. You asked me to do work behind her and let clients believe it came from her. Those aren't the same thing. They would have become the same thing over time. No. One builds competence. The other hides the lack of it. Mom said, Gary, she's right about that. He snapped his head toward her. Not now, Linda. Mom's mouth closed, then opened again. No. This is exactly when. The room changed. Not dramatically. Dad didn't explode. Mom didn't make a speech. She simply didn't disappear. You wanted Brooke ready on a schedule, she said. You kept using Nora to fill whatever Brooke hadn't learned yet. Dad stared at her. You signed off on every bit of it. I know. That stopped him for half a second. Mom looked at me. I know. I didn't rescue her from the discomfort either. Dad shut the folder. So, this is what we're doing. Everybody gets to rewrite history except me. Records aren't rewriting history, I said. They're why you can't. His face reddened. You think a spreadsheet knows more about this company than I do? No. I think dates know when files were created. He pushed his chair back. I am tired of being talked to like I'm on trial. You called the meeting. I called the meeting because I wanted one chance to fix what's left. What does fixing it look like? He pointed between Brooke and me. You come back. Both of you. Brooke continues learning. Nora advises. We transition properly instead of throwing 30 years away. Because everybody suddenly needs their name on every scrap of paper. For one strange second, I could see the version he wanted. Brooke at the front. Me, behind her. Dad slowly stepping away. Mom smoothing the edges. A Whitman name still on the door. If you looked only at the photograph, it might even resemble Harmony. What happens to Northline? I asked. Dad waved one hand. You keep it. And when Whitman needs something, you consult. At a professional fee? His pause answered first. We're talking about family. I leaned back. No. You're talking about the same arrangement with a new title. That's not fair. It's extremely fair. That's why you don't like it. Mom looked down. Brooke didn't. Dad stared at me for several seconds. Then he said, Fine. Tom takes over. Brooke stays gone. You stay in your little studio. But don't pretend this isn't the choice you made. There were a dozen answers I could have given him. I chose the shortest one. It is. His expression shifted. I think he had expected denial. Maybe he wanted me to insist he had forced this. But I had made a choice. That was the point. Dad wanted a family succession badly enough to build one out of borrowed competence. Brooke chose not to accept it. I chose not to subsidize it. He chose what came next. Nobody needed to be absolved of agency. Dad looked at the clock. Then we're done. I stood. We are. Mom followed me into the hallway. Nora. I stopped. She lowered her voice. I'm sorry. For what? For telling you to come because I thought maybe you could make this easier. The answer surprised me because it was specific. Not sorry you're upset. Not sorry things got complicated. She named the behavior. I nodded. Thank you. Mom looked toward the closed conference room door. What happens now? You go home when you want to. She gave me a tired smile. That simple? No. But it's your decision. I left before Dad came out. On Monday morning, The Arts Center team had a design review. Maya had changed the location of a small, multi-purpose room. At first, I disliked it. Then she walked me through the reason. The revised location shortened the route from the accessible entrance and gave the after-school program better separation from evening events. I studied the plan. You're right. Maya blinked. That easy? Don't get used to it. Luis laughed from the other end of the table. Maya pointed at the drawing. Do you want me to present it at the community meeting? You made the change. So yes? So yes. A year earlier, the idea of sending a junior architect to explain a decision I had approved might have made me nervous. Not because I wanted the credit. Because I had confused leadership with being the person who always had the answer. Dad had made the opposite mistake with Brooke. He had tried to give her the answer without making sure she knew the work. Both systems put too much weight on one person's image. I wanted something better. That Friday, Dad emailed. Tom accepted the transition role. I hope you're happy with the outcome. I stared at the sentence while the office emptied around me. The old instinct appeared one more time. Explain. Tell him I wasn't happy that his dream changed. Tell him I never wanted Whitman to fail. Tell him I still respected what he built. Tell him I wished he had found another way. Every statement was true. None was required. I wrote, I hope the transition works well. Then I shut down my computer. Rachel was waiting outside because we were going back to the pottery studio. You ready? She asked. I have a bowl to ruin. You ruined the last one. That was a vase. She looked at me. That was supposed to be a vase. I laughed all the way to the elevator. At the studio, I sat at the wheel and pressed both hands around a lump of wet clay. The first time I tried this, I had pushed too hard and collapsed the center. The instructor had told me something I kept thinking about afterward. Pressure isn't the problem, she had said. Uneven pressure is. That evening, I kept my hands steady. The clay rose slowly between them. Not perfect. Not symmetrical. Mine. When I checked my phone later, there was a message from Brooke. Dad announced Tom to the staff today. I waited. Another appeared. He told them the company is moving away from family succession because neither of his daughters wanted the responsibility. There was the old story, already being adjusted. I typed, "What are you going to do?" 3 dots appeared. Stopped. Appeared again. Nothing tonight. I smiled. For once, neither of us was rushing to repair the version Dad had chosen to tell. I put the phone away and went back to the wheel. The bowl was still turning, and for the first time in my life, I understood that keeping something from collapsing did not mean I had to hold it forever. A month after Tom accepted the transition role, a former Whitman client emailed Northline asking a question that would have sent me into a spiral the year before. He attached a new Whitman renovation qualifications package. Nora, he wrote, I thought Northline developed the early concept for the Riverside project. Am I remembering that wrong? I opened the attachment. Riverside was one of the 11 projects in my provenance record. The new package no longer called Brooke the sole creative lead, but it described the concept as having been developed by the Whitman design team. Technically, cleaner. Still incomplete. For several minutes, I considered doing nothing. Dad's voice lived in the back of my head even when he wasn't in the room. Let it go. The past is the past. Do you really need your name on everything? Then I asked myself a different question. If this were any other contractor using Northline's work in a current marketing package, what would I do? The answer was easy. I wrote back to the former client. You remember correctly. Northline developed the initial concept studies. Whitman Renovations subsequently carried the project forward, and an outside architect of record developed the permit documents. No accusations. No adjectives. Just sequence. Then, I emailed Tom Reeves. I attached the relevant source page from the provenance record and the original dated concept PDF. Tom, the current qualifications package describes Riverside as developed by the Whitman design team. Northline created the initial concept studies. Please revise future versions so the project history is accurate. Tom replied before lunch. Understood. I'll have it corrected. That was all. No battle, no family summit. No one had to decide whether I was a good daughter before correcting a professional record. Dad called at 12:26. You went around me. I was standing beside the conference table, reviewing Arts Center millwork samples. I contacted the general manager of the company using Northline's work. I'm still the owner. Then Tom can copy you on the correction. You could have called me first. I already spent 6 years calling you first. He was quiet. Behind me, Maya and Luis were debating whether the community room storage doors needed another finish sample. Dad said, "You won. Brooke left. Tom has the job. What else do you want?" The question stopped me. Not because I didn't have an answer. Because I realized how differently we understood winning. I want our work represented accurately. That's it? Yes. You expect me to believe this isn't personal? It is personal. It's also still true. He exhaled sharply. You know what people are saying? That I pushed both daughters out. I can't control what people say. You could correct them. What would I correct? That you chose Northline years ago. That Brooke chose to leave. That I didn't throw either of you away. I set the sample down. That's your story to tell. So you're just going to let people think whatever they want? Yes. The word came out before I had time to decorate it. Dad went silent. That answer frightened the old version of me more than any confrontation ever had. For years, I had spent enormous energy trying to control whether people thought I was selfish, cold, competitive, dramatic, ungrateful. Dad knew that. Mom knew it. Brooke knew it. Maybe I had taught them. If someone asks me about my work, I continued, I'll answer. If someone asks why I'm not part of Whitman, I'll answer for myself. I'm not running a campaign about you. You've gotten very comfortable walking away. No, I've gotten comfortable not chasing. He hung up. I put the phone in my pocket and went back to the millwork samples. Maya held up 2 pieces of oak. Did I miss something? Nothing you need to solve. She raised one eyebrow, then handed me the darker sample. Good, because I need you to solve this. I laughed. That was the difference. At Northline, people asked for my expertise because it was my job. They did not confuse access with love. 2 weeks later, Brooke showed up at my studio carrying a cardboard file box. She had texted first. That still mattered to me. What's that? I asked. Stuff from my old Whitman office. She set the box on the conference table. Inside were presentation boards, finish schedules, old printouts, and 2 external hard drives. I found some Northline material mixed into my folders. I looked at her. I haven't opened everything, she said. I figured you should decide what belongs with your records. That was new. Not the box. The sentence. Months earlier, Brooke would have assumed that anything in her possession belonged to the version of the project that benefited her. Now she was asking where it belonged. We spent about 40 minutes going through the contents. Most of it was harmless duplication. A few files filled small gaps in my timeline. Nothing changed the big picture. No hidden confession. No second conspiracy. Just more ordinary evidence of how casually boundaries had once been blurred. Brooke pulled out a printed presentation board from one of the old hotel projects. Her photograph was on the back beside Dad's. She looked at it for a long moment. I remember this dinner. So do I. You were there? Yes. Dad introduced me as the creative brain. Yes. She winced. I thought you didn't care. I worked hard to look like I didn't. Brooke turned the board face down. At my new job, nobody cares who my father is. How terrible. She smiled faintly. It was for about 2 weeks. Then she looked at me. Now it's kind of a relief. I waited. Last month I screwed up a client presentation, she said. Not huge. I put an outdated finish option into the deck. What happened? My manager asked why. And? I said I used the wrong version. That was it? She told me to fix it. Brooke laughed softly. No one called me talented. No one called me a disappointment. It was just a mistake. Something in her face loosened when she said it. Dad had spent years protecting her from the ordinary discomfort of competence. Questions. Corrections. Not knowing. Being wrong. He thought he was building confidence. He had actually made every gap feel dangerous. Brooke tapped the old board. Dad keeps asking when I'm coming back. What do you tell him? Not now. Is that what you mean? She shrugged. I don't know yet. The eldest daughter instinct rose immediately. Help her decide. List the options. Build a decision tree. Ask about salary, growth, commute, long-term goals. I stopped myself. Brooke noticed. You have an opinion. I have several. And you didn't ask me to run your life. She gave me a look. That's annoyingly healthy. I'm working on it. Before leaving, she pushed the box toward me. There's one other thing. What? I told Dad to stop telling people you convinced me to leave. I studied her face. What did he say? That I was defending you again. And what did you say? Brooke smiled without much humor. I told him I was correcting the record about my own decision. I recognized the wording. She did too. You're contagious, she said. No, accuracy is. This time, when she left, I didn't wonder whether we were going to become close again. That question used to consume me. Now, I cared more about whether the relationship we had was honest. If honesty eventually grew into closeness, good. If it didn't, honesty was still better than intimacy built on pretending. The Arts Center entered its last stretch that fall. For months, I had watched drawings become demolition, framing, walls, doors, lighting, and rooms people could actually walk through. The old auditorium became a flexible performance space. The inaccessible side entrance was replaced with an entry that didn't send wheelchair users around the building. A dark storage area became 2 classrooms. Luis came with me for the final existing conditions walk, because several original masonry details had been preserved from his survey work. At one point, he stood in the lobby looking at an exposed brick wall. I thought you were going to make us cover this. I almost did. You were wrong? Careful. He grinned. Should I document this historic moment? You'll lose building access. He laughed and walked ahead. I stayed behind for a second. The lobby had once existed only as lines on a screen. There was something humbling about seeing people occupy a space you had argued over in inches. A child ran through the entrance and nearly collided with his mother. An older man stood near the community notice board. 2 staff members were discussing where to put a folding table. Nobody cared about the internal politics that had shaped my year. They cared whether the building worked. That felt healthy too. A few days before the opening, the Arts Center director emailed the draft of a permanent project plaque. I opened it. Northline Studio was listed. My name was there as principal architect. Maya was there as project architect. The consultants were listed beneath us. Luis wasn't. He had been an intern when the project began and had done much of the existing conditions research that shaped our early decisions. I called the fabricator. Please add Luis Ortega under project research and existing conditions. The woman on the phone said, We usually keep the plaque to senior team members. He contributed materially to the project. It'll make the text smaller. That's fine. A pause. Anything else? I checked the list again. No, that's all. After the call, I leaned back. 6 years earlier, Dad had asked me to remove my footer because it didn't fit his presentation template. Now I had just made the type smaller so someone else's name could stay. The difference seemed almost embarrassingly obvious. At the opening, Maya spoke about the design process. I let her. Luis explained the existing building to a group of students. I let him. The director thanked Northline, the consultants, contractors, donors, and community groups. No one introduced me as somebody's daughter. No one called me the technical one. My name was simply attached to the work I had done. That evening, our team went to dinner. A large bowl of soup appeared in the center of the table. Steam rose toward me. Months earlier, that would have pulled me back to my parents' dining room. This time I noticed the smell first. Ginger, garlic, lemongrass. Maya reached for the ladle, then paused. You want some? I held out my bowl. Yeah. She served me. Nothing happened. No memory owned the room. Later, back at my condo, I placed the blue ceramic bowl I had bought at the farmer's market beside the crooked one I had made in pottery class. My phone buzzed. Mom, the Arts Center looks beautiful. I saw the plaque. Congratulations. A second message followed. Your dad saw it too. For a moment, I waited for the rest. He's proud. He misses you. Call him. He wants to explain. Nothing came. Mom had stopped carrying the message where he had not sent one. I smiled. Thank you, Mom. Then I put the phone down. The next morning, Maya left a revised drawing on my desk. At the bottom was the project team. Every contributor still listed. I checked the work, marked 2 details, approved the revision, and left every name exactly where it belonged. For most of my life, I had confused strength with capacity. If I could more, then I should. If I could fix something, then I was responsible for fixing it. If I survived being overlooked, then being overlooked must not have mattered. I know better now. Strength is not the amount of yourself you can give away before collapsing. Sometimes it is the ability to look at what everyone expects you to carry and decide, calmly, that it belongs in someone else's hands. Sometimes it is protecting your time. Sometimes it is charging your full rate. Sometimes it is refusing a title you once dreamed about. And sometimes it is nothing more dramatic than making sure a name stays on the page where it was earned.